I hope everybody is safe, and we are so glad to be doing this virtually this year to make sure that we still are able to engage with our students and our teachers, and from the Clinton Center to wherever you are in Arkansas and the country, welcome to our program. Before we dive into the programmatic side of things, we'd like to start out with a quick icebreaker to try to help warm the room up, make sure we all know who's here. I know it's going to be a bit different. Usually in person, we'd be in the Great Hall, getting on our feet, shaking at people's hands. But in time, we'll get back to that. But in the meantime, I'd like to introduce our Education Programs Associate, Cassie Exum, who is going to help us with our morning icebreaker. Cassie?
Hi, good morning, everybody. I hope that you're all safe and healthy and awake this morning. We're going to test the latter by doing some Q&A with you all. I'm going to start by giving you the definition of civic engagement, which is working to make a difference in the civic life of one's community and developing the combination of knowledge, skills, values, and motivation to make that difference. It means promoting the quality of life in a community through both political and non-political processes. Now I'm going to post a question in the chat box, and I ask that you please post your answer in the chat box as well. So my first question is, what are examples of ways that you can engage with your community? So I'll give you all about 30 seconds, 45 seconds to post your answer. There's no right or wrong answers, just looking for ideas here.
Thanks, Cassie.
So our first submission says advertisements. That is one way that you can engage with your community. That's absolutely correct. Okay, Little Rock West High School submitted volunteer at a homeless shelter, and that is another great idea. I'm loving these ideas you have. Can I get one or two more maybe? Great. Little Rock West also submitted that you can have a food drive and also stated that they did this last year. That's incredible. I love your ideas and I love your thoughts. The last submission that we received is doing projects in the community. And that's exactly correct. We're going to hear more about ideas of projects that you can do during our session today. So now I'm going to go ahead and enter my second question into the chat box. And same thing, I hope that you'll post your answers in the chat box as well. And my second question is, why is civic engagement important? Once again, no right or wrong answers, and I hope that you'll leave your thoughts in the chat box now. The first answer to the question, why is civic engagement important, that we received says to make it better for the people that come behind us. And I absolutely agree with that. Happiness increases, absolutely. Can we get one more answer to the question, why civic engagement is important? It looks like someone posted an answer to the Q&A box and they answered, enjoy doing good things for the community, it makes you feel good. And I agree with that as well. So thank you all for participating today. These answers are so great. Now that we've got you thinking about civic engagement and its importance, I'm going to give it back to Mr. Thomas to introduce today's guest.
Thanks so much, Cassie, and thanks everybody for participating in our icebreaker today. It was great to hear your answers. And as I said before, if you could let us know what school you're with, that way we can get your name adjusted so we know who's with us today. We know we have Little Rock West High School, School of Innovation in the house. Thank you all for being here. And I know we've got a few others as well. So thanks in advance for letting us know. So to get our workshop today started, we have an amazing conversation ahead for you today. And I'd like to introduce to you first our moderator, Tynesia Boyea-Robinson. She, as an entrepreneur and Six Sigma Black Belt and technologist, Tanisha is uniquely positioned to catalyze results-driven social change. She has been religiously leading and writing about enterprises that do well and do good for over a decade. As president and CEO of CapEQ, formerly Reliance Method, which she founded in 2011, she demonstrated how business and community goals can align towards mutual outcomes, helping Fortune 500 clients like the Carlyle Group, Marriott, and others change the way the world does business. In her previous role as Chief Impact Officer of Living Cities, Tanisha was responsible for ensuring $100 million of investments produced outcomes that improve the lives of people across the country. In her book, Just Change: How to Collaborate for Lasting Impact, Tanisha shares her experience investing in cities and leaders across the country. Mrs. Boyea-Robinson, thank you for joining us this morning. We are happy to have you as a moderator, and we'll be hearing a lot more from you as this workshop progresses. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Anytime. And now on to our featured speaker of the day. Every year we look for a student speaker who is close in age and close in academics to our high school audience. And we always embark on an exciting journey to see who is out here either on social media, on the news, and in this instance, she is on every platform doing amazing work at her very young age. And it's my honor to introduce her. I've got a few words, and then we have a short video clip to introduce her, and then we will let Tanisha start our conversation. So our featured speaker today is Chanice McClover-Lee. She is 18, she's an 18-year-old community organizer, writer, and changemaker. As a self-proclaimed young revolutionary, Chanice is deeply committed to radically transforming society in ways that have never been done before. Her commitment to societal change has been shown through her writing, experience as a community organizer, and global recognition. Chanice is currently a student at Howard University. Her first best-selling book, The Young Revolutionary: A Teen's Guide to Activism, was written to give young people the confidence, tools, and resources to become impactful community organizers and leaders who create long-lasting change. When it comes to utilizing her voice to educate, inspire, and empower others, Shanice has been recognized as a 2018 Young Futurist from The Root, a 2019 Girl Hero from Girl Up campaign, and a 2019 Black Girls Rock MAD Girl. Let me welcome Shanice with a video, and we will start our presentation. Let me see if I can get everything loaded up for y'all. 1 second. Okay. There we go. Oh, okay. I believe we're having an audio issue, so I apologize for that, but I will let the video play briefly so we can see a bit more of our featured speaker introducing herself in this really compelling video. I'll work on getting this fixed, Shanice. I apologize. But with that, I will stop the video share for the moment and turn it over to Tanisha to start our conversation.
Chanice, so happy to have you. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be in conversation with you today.
That's wonderful. You've done more in your short time on this life than I think many people have done in many more decades. So just tell me what got you started in the first place.
So I get asked that question a lot, and I think when you're a young person and you kind of have I don't know what it is. It's like my generation, I think a lot of us just get to a certain point where we get like the change making bug. Like we all just want to be a part of something bigger than ourselves and something that is long lasting and is making the world a better place. So I would say just as a result of growing up in the age of social movements, like seeing the Black Lives Matter movement, seeing so many different young people of all different backgrounds and walks of life rise up to create changes about causes that were important to them, and noticing that those same things are happening in my own community and not just on the news, on social media, just got me inspired to want to be a part of some type of change. So I just started, getting involved in local social justice organizations and really trying to figure out what exactly it was that I was passionate about and what changes I wanted to see in the world, so that I could kind of figure out, okay, this is, my role. This is how I'm going to contribute to the world. This is what fulfills me. And from then on, I just, I haven't stopped. I think once you realize that you have a passion for just, making some type of difference in the world and to improve the lives of other people, it's not necessarily something that you stop doing. It's just something that becomes a part of you, who you are as a person, and you continue that throughout your lifetime. And that's what I'm doing.
That's powerful. So it sounds like the national movement was really compelling for you, but you also said you saw examples locally. What are some examples of people that you live close by with who are making change in your community?
Well, I remember being involved with a local organization called Dream Defenders, the New Florida Majority, Florida Student Power Network, and I just started getting involved in terms of the civic engagement sector of activism. So I was, the 15-year-old making calls on weekends, phone banking, asking voters in Florida to vote yes on Amendment 4, which, for those who aren't familiar, it was a bill that is now a law in Florida that will give people who were formerly incarcerated and convicted of felonies their rights to vote restored. So just ensuring that everyone, no matter what mistakes you've made, have the right to exercise your right when you've, done the time for whatever you did. And yeah, I, did things like that. I became a teen advisor for Girl Up, which is a campaign of the United Nations Foundation focused on gender equality throughout the world. So I basically just served as a youth advisor for the campaign to kind of give insight on, this is what adolescent girls around the world want and need, and these are ways that you can impact us. And yeah, those are some examples of organizations that I was a part of. And then a few years later, I started my own organization here in South Florida called Florida Changemakers. And the result of that happening wasn't just to start an organization just for the sake of starting an organization. I saw a need that wasn't being fulfilled in my community, and I noticed that there were probably so many young people um, who wanted a way to get involved and create changes in our community, but there wasn't a pre-existing space to do that. And I live in South Florida in Broward County, so while all of the national outrage over gun violence prevention and the Parkland movement, that is minutes away from where I live. So I'm right in the epicenter of where so many young people were had all this energy of wanting to create some type of change, but they don't know, where to put that energy. So I started Florida Changemakers, and I got the idea to hold a one-day youth summit for South Florida youth to learn the basics of activism, organizing, and how to implement solutions for community issues. And my vision was for the event to be 100% teen and youth led. So I just, I called up some of my other youth activists or community organizer friends who I knew, ran some type of club at their school or did something in their community. And within a matter of 6 months, we planned an event that was entirely led and organized by teenage high school students. And we ended up gathering around 60 students from the Tri-County area in South Florida. And we had presenters from the ACLU. We talked about the school to prison pipeline. We talked about LGBTQ matters. We talked about direct action, like how you can plan some type of protest or demonstration as a young person, how to do so safely. And all of it was 100% youth led. So it's really just about, me recognizing that there is a need for something and figuring out how I can fill that gap.
So you mentioned everything from gender equity to advocacy, but you said you've exposed yourself to things to figure out your passion. How would you summarize what your personal passion is?
My personal passion, I think I how can I best describe it? Because I think a lot of times people ask me, okay, sometimes people ask, okay, what are you an activist for? But I think I don't necessarily have to be passionate about one specific thing. Like, I just recognize that there are systems in place that harm marginalized people. There are systems in place that harm people who look just like me, whether they be women, whether they be Black people, Black women. Like, I recognize that my identity and my role in the society is affected by so many different systems of oppression that marginalized people have always been up against. And I just recognize that I, want to live in a world where everyone has complete freedom. I don't want to live in a world where we know that certain groups of people don't have access to certain things. We know that certain groups of people are treated unfairly based off the color of their skin. Like, I want a world where everyone can just be as free as possible and live. We all have the same opportunities to live up to our fullest potentials and our fullest selves. And my vision for freedom is just what was I going to say? I was saying that my vision for freedom and how I'm going to get there is, I'm sure it's going to shift like throughout my lifetime, but that's basically like a broad meaning of what I'm, doing this work for and why it's so important to me. So that is, pretty much my driving force, in that the way that I, get there may look differently, because right now, I'm young, but in the future, I want to be a civil rights attorney. So, I'm doing a lot of different things, but they're ultimately directing towards one overall goal.
That's helpful. So when you think about all of the vision and drive and passion you have for action and results,
Mhm.
what are your thoughts on how that compares to the political climate we're currently experiencing as a country?
So I think we are living in an age where so many people, like, I have even heard, people who have been activists and community organizers, like even Angela Davis, said that she's never even seen a movement that is currently happening right now. And I think what the time that we are living in is very much so reflective of, the way that when someone is tired of experiencing something and then it keeps happening over and over again, there's going to be some type of mass reaction to it. So that's what we're seeing now. And I think what we're seeing now is great, because a lot of people are realizing that, okay, like, it's going to take not just one of us, but it's going to take all of us to create the changes that we want to see, whether that be through directly addressing the needs of your immediate community, whether that be voting, whatever medium you someone wants that to be through. I think now is the perfect time that a lot of people are realizing there are several ways that you can be a part of some type of change. And a lot of people also recognize that it's not just something that you do. I personally think, like, there's a quote that says activism is your rent for like living on the planet. And it's basically just describing that as a result of just, being here and being in this society, we all have some type of duty to just contribute to the world and make the world a better place, whether, no matter how big or small it may be. And that is definitely what a lot of people are realizing in this moment in time, in this political climate. Like, we've seen movements where certain people realize, or certain groups of people wanted to advocate for a specific thing, but now it's kind of like all across the board, where people of all different types of backgrounds and walks of life are realizing that, we all have the power to create the changes that we want to see.
That's inspiring, Chanice. And it's you've been really clear about equity and freedom are kind of the guideposts or pillars to the way that you look at activism.
Mhm.
If you think about what's facing the next generation and you make those goals more specific, what do you feel like are the top 3 to 5 issues that we have to get right in order to set up your generation or the next generation for success in our country?
So I'm not too educated on this topic, but I've, been taking the efforts to learn more about it. But I know that climate change is one thing that my generation is heavily focused on, because it's like, how can we adequately plan for our futures and even dream of a vision for the world if we're unsure of what the state of the world is even going to be in terms of the physical structure and the safety for us to even live on earth. So I think that is, a big issue that is facing the next generation, because there's been so many studies, and there are a lot of youth-led organizations that focus on, doing environmental justice work and climate change work, which I think is very necessary, because if you don't even have, a healthy planet to live on, then there is no way that you can dream of a better world, because the world has to be in a good state in the first place. So ensuring that, the earth around us and climate change and environmental justice, and that, everyone has access to just basic things like clean water, air, and things that we all deserve just as a result of living. That's one big issue. What is the next one? So as we're seeing now, race relations, that's definitely one thing that is coming to the forefront. That's one thing that is at the forefront of everyone's minds. And I think we are in a time where so many people are recognizing that it's not just enough to, not be racist, but we have to be actively anti-racist in a society where we've seen and we know that people are treated differently because of the color of our skin. So that is number two. And number three, what would I say? What else would I say? I think my generation is very accepting when it comes to gender and sexuality. Like, I think we are very, much the generation who has kind of introduced, fluidity, and not necessarily identifying within confined boxes. But I still think, we have a lot of work to do. Like, we still have a lot of work to make sure that women, specifically women of color and marginalized women, are treated fairly, and we have the same level playing field as everyone else. We have to make sure that, even people who, how can I describe it? We have to make sure that we show up for transgender people. We have to make sure that we show up for people who exist outside of the gender binary. And we have to make sure that we show up for people who, may not exist in the traditional or standard way that is most known to most people. And I think that's one thing that my generation has definitely introduced and put at the forefront of so many different people's minds. And yeah, so that's definitely the third issue that I would say, like, although we're pretty accepting, we definitely still do have a lot of work to go to make sure that, everyone, no matter how you identify or exist, just has the ability to live your life as free as possible without any restrictions or systems in place that will harm you.
That's very helpful. I so during our prep call, you needed to get permission for class to be at this meeting, I believe.
Yes.
So, love to hear, how are you balancing changing the world and getting an education?
So I'm still figuring that out as we're going through this time, because like we are all living in a time that we've never experienced before. So balancing, doing my Zoom classes all day and then doing another Zoom like this, but for different things, it's definitely been interesting. It hasn't been easy, just trying to figure out, where, like, how I can do everything that I want to do without burning myself out, because it is really easy to say yes to so many things, especially when it's something that's important to me. I'm just like, oh yes, I'll do it. But sometimes I don't always have, the mental or emotional capacity or even the time, but I may try to just, squeeze everything in, like if I see like a space in my calendar. But I'm also recognizing that you can't take care of the world and you can't take care of the people around you if you don't take care of yourself. So I'm just now learning that, on this journey of someone who has been involved from a very young age and been, passionate about creating changes, just recognizing that I have to, set boundaries around what I can and cannot do and what I'm, willing to extend myself for. So I'm still figuring out the whole balance thing, but I think, I have a while to, not get it down pat.
Yes. Well, and self-care is such a critical component, like you said, of world saving that for a long time, a lot of folks have not prioritized. So I'm so glad to see that you're doing that because we need you around the world and to make it a better place. So a question I have for you, for folks in the audience, you have done so many things. People might feel overwhelmed, kind of like, I don't know how I could ever do what Chanice has done. Do you have any recommendations for practical steps you could take if you want to start an organization, or if you're interested in a book, or even just what are ways to get involved?
Yeah, I get that. Sorry, I was plugging my computer in because it was dying. So I get that quite often, but it's like I don't want people to be like me. Like I want everyone to be the best version of yourself in whatever shape or form that may look like. And I think when it comes to being civically engaged or being a youth activist or a youth community organizer, it just starts at you identifying, just first observing the world around you. Like so many people don't even know about the community that they live in, the people who make up your community. So that is really just the most basic step. Like just find ways to get involved. Like if there's, I don't know, a town hall meeting, show up, be the young person to show up who people wouldn't expect to be in the audience, and find ways to get involved. So aside from, being observant about your community, after you observe, just really take a look around. Okay, what things do I want to see changed, and how can I contribute to that change? Like, for example, my zip code is considered a food desert. So that means that people in my community don't have easy access to fresh fruits and vegetables and healthy food. So a few weeks ago, I went and got a refrigerator, and I'm going to start a community fridge. Just it's going to be a refrigerator in a public place that a local business is hosting for me to have the refrigerator there, and it's going to be filled with mostly fresh fruits, produce, so that anyone can have the option to take what they need and leave what they don't. And it's something as simple as that. Like you don't always have to have some type of elaborate plan or start a nonprofit to make a difference. Like it's literally as simple as you taking a look and being able to identify what your community around you need, and how you can directly address that issue. How you choose to directly address that issue can be in a wide array of ways, but I would definitely say if you're having trouble figuring out how to get to that point, think about things that you're good at, things that you're passionate about, so that whatever you're doing doesn't feel like how do I say, doesn't feel like work. It just feels like something that is fulfilling and something that you are excited to do. It's a lot easier to do any type of social impact work when you know that you are genuinely enjoying what you're doing, and not just for the sake of feeling like, oh, I want to do something good, but you just have to genuinely have that drive to even want to create changes and just do good from just as a result from it coming from your heart. And yeah, so definitely just take a look at what you're good at, what you're skilled at, and how you can intertwine those two things into some type of social change.
What would you say to folks who would push back and say, oh, my voice doesn't matter, or the adults will never let me do that? What feedback do you have for those folks?
That is definitely an interesting question, because I have grown up always being told the exact opposite. Like if I wanted, to go to a protest, or if I wanted to go to an organization's meeting, like I was always encouraged from my family, my mom, the people around me. So I never, received pushback saying that my voice didn't matter. If anything, I was always being constantly reminded that my voice did matter, no matter how young I was. So because I've grown up with that level of confidence and reassurance, I, find it very easy for me to tell other young people, like, what's stopping you? There's nothing stopping you. It doesn't matter that you're in middle school or you're in high school or you don't have everything figured out. If you want to do something, just do it. Like, create a plan to do it. And there may be people, there may be adults who think that you should just stay in your place or you shouldn't do this or you shouldn't do that. But I think if you know that you are doing something from the good of your heart and you know that it is bigger than yourself, then it doesn't really matter if someone thinks, oh, you're too young to be doing that. Why don't you just focus on X, Y, and Z? I think if you know that this is what you're meant to be doing, then it's a lot easier to stand up against pushback that you may receive from adults or older people or even some family members, because there are a lot of young people who are activists and they're civically involved, and they are not supported by the people around them because they are told to just minimize their voice. And that kind of is a difficult situation to be in. Although I've have not experienced that myself, I understand that my life experience is not the same as everyone else's. So yeah, definitely just identify what you're passionate about and figure out how you are going to get there. And your voice does make a difference and it does matter. And it may not look the same as the person next to you, but it's just figuring out like what works uniquely for you.
Thank you so much, Chanice, for your leadership, for your insights, and for your example. We really appreciate that. And Nate, I'm going to ask you, what's the transition? Should we transition to Q&A or transition to me?
Thanks so much. Yeah, we are going to transition to some Q&A, and just as a gentle reminder, if there are any, we can do a few things, but I'll turn it over to our assistant manager, Charisse, if you're ready to hop on to help us with the second half of our program, and Cassie will also be assisting with that. So we'll give you guys a minute. I think a lot of y'all are in classrooms. There might only be one keyboard, so if you want to just take a minute, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A box, and you can enter in your questions there. They go straight to us, and we'll be able to pose them to our panelists. But while we wait for that, thank you both for an amazing conversation. Chanice, you're going places. I cannot wait to see what your future holds. I'll be in DC in a few weeks, helping a friend move up there. So you were in a city full of movers and shakers. So I can't wait to see what you do. And for all the students, just take a look. Chanice is doing it, and she's been doing it since she was 16. So definitely stay encouraged, and we would love to hear any questions you have. I don't think there's much limits here, so just put your Q&A in the chat, and I'll hand it over to Charisse, who will transition us into our second half, and we'll even be able to take some questions on the mic as well. Thanks, everybody. And I think you're on mute, Charisse. There you go. Oh, you're back on mute again. Oh no, you're still on mute, Charisse. Hold on one second. Well, while she figures that, there you are.
Got it. Y'all hear me? Okay. Sorry. Thank you so much again, Tanisha and Chanice. This has been awesome so far. And while we wait on a few questions to come in, I have a couple of questions for you, Tanisha. And before we move into talking a little bit more about you, and this may actually transition us. How do you see any similarities between Chanice and yourself with the things that you've been doing?
Well, first of all, Chanice is a trailblazer, so I need to take notes. I need to go back in time, tell my 15-year-old version of myself to stop being worried about boys and do other things with my life. It's basically a short story.
Yeah.
I do feel like the concept of, you can do whatever you want to do, put your mind to it. My parents gave me that similar kind of background. My father, I was the first born of multiple children. My father didn't have any sons. And so he taught me everything from like how to fix my car to, what to do I ended up majoring in electrical engineering and computer science. And I did lots of non-girl things from a gender standpoint. Back in the day, there wasn't as much acceptance on or even acknowledgement of gender fluidity. So it was outrageous just to be a woman doing what's considered male things. So I think that most of the similarities, I think, would be the way Chanice and I have navigated the world at that age, as opposed to, I think Chanice is way far advanced of me and that understanding of systems and systemic bias and structures. I didn't start to really wrestle with some of that until much later on in my career.
And how has that led you to where you are now, as far as when you started? If you had started a little earlier, what do you think you'd be somewhere else?
Actually, no, I've been really blessed and fortunate with my career path. I think, I've had lots of caring adults who come in my life at inflection points and choice points where I could have gone left. They said, oh, you know what? Great example. When I was in high school, neither of my parents went to college, and they had me, really young, and they weren't ever married. And so, I had planned on going to the local community college to be able to help with my sisters and brothers, because I was kind of like the third parent. And I had a mentor tell me, well, what are your grades, or how are you doing in school? It's like, oh, I'm doing fine in school. She's like, well, where do you want to go? And it's like, oh, I'm going to go to, I grew up in Florida, Chanice. So I'm going to go to Brevard Community College, which is 20 minutes from my house. And she's like, oh no, girlfriend, I'm going to help you, and you're going to apply to stuff. And if it weren't for her, I would have never applied. And I feel like every time I hit this point where I wasn't aware, wasn't exposed, didn't know, I had a caring adult who said, this is what's possible for you in the world. And you only need to give me like that much information, and then I'm zooming right through the door.
Awesome. So I have a question for both of you all. This is from Little Rock West High School. Do you have suggestions for how we can begin serving our community safely during COVID?
Well, do you first know like how your community needs to be served? Like, is there a need for food? Like, is there a need for like protection equipment, like masks and face shields and hand sanitizer? I think, the first step is identifying first what your community needs and figuring out, how we can make this happen in a safe, socially distanced way.
Chanice is spot on that, and I'll give a couple of examples. So, Chanice mentioned food. One of the things that's happened in the time of COVID is that senior citizens were often the ones who were volunteering at food banks. Mm-hmm. Now, because they are more at risk for the disease, there are not as many volunteers, and there's a huge need for food. And so there have been more and more requests for volunteers who are younger. So that's an example where, because of your age and that need, it's a great intersection. And most of institutions have been given guidelines on how to do things in times of COVID to be more safe. There's also lots of shift to things that are virtual. So for instance, regardless of your political leaning, there's text banking, there's phone banking, there's hotlines for certain things. So I think in the light of the election, even if you're not able to vote, folks are leveraging younger people to actually recruit people who are older who can help with voting. So there's all sorts of different ways and ideas. And I think, to Chanice's point, it really is starting with what you're most interested in and then plugging into systems from there.
Awesome. So do you both have organizations where people can assist you virtually? Is there any way to tap into some things that you all are doing currently?
Not currently, but I will in the coming weeks share, I will share if there are any opportunities or things that I'm doing virtually for people to get involved, but not currently.
Okay.
I am putting something in the chat. So right now I have an initiative I'm running as part of my company called Path to 1555. It is a national initiative focused on growing existing Black businesses. So the number comes from, if 15% of existing Black businesses could hire at least one more person, it would result in $55 billion to the economy and add 600,000 jobs. One of the ways that you can get involved with that is get connected, join on the newsletter, and share information with us on how Black businesses are faring in your community, what kind of supports they need, and what we're doing nationally is trying to get more resources towards that. So one example of that is we hosted what we call a hackathon. It's a 2-hour event where we bring together different leaders in the ecosystem. They come up with solutions and we prioritize 2 of them that we know we can get done in 3 to 6 months. So as a result of that, we already have $300 million pledged to Black businesses across national philanthropic organizations that, but for that, we wouldn't have been able to do that. So would be great to see others focused on ways to support Black businesses in their community as well.
That is absolutely awesome. Do you have, all right, can you include your social media? If you have any social media outlets where they can reach out to you, and as well for you, Chanice?
Yes.
Can you include it in the chat? Thank you so much for that. We do have another question. So thank you for your brilliant suggestions. Actually, it's a comment from Little Rock West, and they said, thank you for your brilliant suggestions. That's awesome. Thank you so much for that, Little Rock West. So Chanice, I do have a question for you. And Tanisha, I would love your just input on it. This is Chanice's first voting opportunity now that she's turned 18. How important do you feel that voting is for students, and what should even the students that are in high school right now start to think about in reference to what their voice is and how to express their voice?
Well, I actually, voted for the first time in August, so in my state primary, but I, pre-registered when I was 16. So when I turned 18 this year, my card just automatically came in the mail. So I don't know what the laws are where you are, but in Florida, you can pre-register at 16. So that, does make it a lot easier. But in terms of voting, I, am someone who recognizes that it is very important, and it is I think of voting as one important tool in a toolbox of a lot of different ways that we can create changes. And I don't, place it as I don't emphasize it to be like the highest, most ultimate way that you can create change, especially when I'm talking to young people who don't have that ability yet. So I want people, tell people the importance of it. Like, I've worked on a political campaign this past summer. I hosted first-time voter workshops for young people, but I also let young people know that this is one way that you can create change and you should utilize this, but also recognize that even if you are young and you don't yet have that ability, don't think that, you're powerless. Like, you're going to get that power when you turn 18. But for now, just utilize, the tools that you have. And even then, like, still encourage the people in your life to get registered and to exercise that freedom. So I definitely do think now we are, definitely in a time where people are realizing the importance of choosing people who represent us well. Just living in a society where, we elect people to represent us and have our best interests and make the changes that they say that they're going to make. So yeah, definitely, I always tell young people the importance of voting, and that, you should always think of it as a tool in a toolbox of 1,000 different ways that you can create changes, but utilize that tool.
Awesome. Tanisha?
Yeah, I totally agree with Chanice on it is one tool, but it is a tool that people died for. Neither Chanice nor I would have been able to vote in not too long ago, right? And when you think about that, and when you think about all of the injustices that folks experience to make sure that we had the right to vote, you don't have the right not to. Yeah, I think that it's just that simple. That said, I think lots of times it's completely understandable why some people would be apathetic on why the vote might feel like it doesn't count, and all of the politics and things that people are wrestling with. And one of the things that I would say as young people that's really awesome is people don't know what you think and they don't know where you're coming. And when that 18-year-old wave comes in and they're like, we care about gender fluidity, people are like, I don't even know what that means. What is that? Like, you guys kind of start to put all us old folks on notice on, you guys have been arguing over stuff that we don't even care about. Like, you really need to do these 3 things. And it gets us ready for the change that we might not be prioritizing because we don't know everything, but we're used to having the power by this point. And it keeps us on our toes and it keeps us on notice. So if you use that tool in your toolbox, in addition to all the other ways you're mobilizing, votes matter to old people because it tells people if you're going to have a job or not.
Very true. Cassie has a question for you guys.
Yes, so you both posted your social media in the chat box, and I was wondering if you could speak to how you leverage your social media in making a change in your community.
Well, I mean, this would be a very good time for the video that I have. I have a whole video on using social media for social change, but I'll just summarize. So I think, especially as young people, like social media has kind of leveled the playing field for it being a medium that most people have access to. You can utilize it to spread information. You can utilize it to spread info on petitions, on important causes in your community. You can utilize it to fundraise. Social media is such a great thing when you're using it correctly. So I think if you are, someone who's wanting to use social media for some type of social good, just find creative ways to take your own social presence and utilizing it to some causes that are important to you, like sharing information, or spreading information on causes that are important to you that you think other people should know about. And that is it in a nutshell.
Yes, I would say that I was slow to social media, but now I kind of have a prioritization of them. So my Facebook I use personally, and my Twitter and LinkedIn I use professionally, and I'm kind of on the gram-ish. Like, I don't do as much on the gram. I'm probably more of a look at what other people are posting on the gram or check out some of the versus battles. But I do think it's important to be mindful of your prioritization of your social media. And also, I'd say something that I think our country is wrestling with right now is your social media feed is important to share things out, but it also is potentially a way that you're narrowing out voices or you're focusing specifically on reinforcing ideas that only you have. It also sometimes kind of helps drive us to be more at odds than we may have been if we didn't speak so quickly in quick characters and try to be pithy. So there is something about social media and civility that our country still has to figure out in terms of how are we leveraging this in a way that's actually advancing dialogue and connectedness as opposed to driving divisiveness. And we haven't figured it out yet. So hopefully you guys figure it out for us because we're doing a really bad job.
That is awesome. You're right. We're not doing such a great job. And my son is in Chanice's age group. And I have a lot of hope for for their age group as well. So absolutely wonderful what you both are doing right now, though, to make a change in our world. And let's see if we have anyone that actually wishes to raise their hand and ask a question. We can unmute them if we have anyone. Okay, I don't see any hands thus far. Okay. Well, Tanisha and Chanice, do you guys have any final words or anything that you would like to leave with our group?
Well, I mean, I wish I could, actually see everyone who is on the call right now, but I really enjoy speaking with other young people. especially because I recognize that as a young person, like it's just so much easier to receive something when you have another young person telling you, like someone, I don't know, 20 years older than me could literally repeat the same thing and it could go in one ear and out of the other. But when you're a teenager talking to another teenager, I could say the same thing and it's like, oh, that makes sense. So I definitely enjoy connecting with other young people. And I have so much hope for our generation because we're not the ones just creating a different world. We're living it now and we're encouraging other people to view things differently. And we're all, trailblazers. Like, I think our generation is the group of people that everyone all over the world are looking at right now. And they have a lot of good reasons to.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, based on what Chanice said, anything I just say, you probably might not even listen to. So I will share just a couple of thoughts on how to think about people who are older than you and how powerful you are as a generation. So I was born in the 70s, and the generation before me feels like how your generation is. It had hit a point where it was fed up with what was going on. That's where you had like the Malcolm X's and the Martin Luther Kings, and everyone was pushing and fighting and pushing and fighting. And they were in the streets and they were like, it doesn't matter. We're going to work on this. And then my generation was taught, okay, we did a whole bunch of work. We finally have a lot of the stuff. Just go do what we said. Like, just go get an education. Just go get a good job. Just go. And everything was like, just do this. And it put a lot of the onus of the change we wanted to see in the world on our living up to all of the resources that were fought on our behalf. And so my generation was taught to, it was hard enough to get you at the table, stay at the table. It was hard enough to be in the room, find a way to stay in the room. And our generation was taught to deal with the injustices. Our generation was taught that the systems were broken, but we've done as much as we can. And you've got to just at least show that you can do the best you can within the systems that we have. And part of the disruption and like the feeling right now is that our generation is getting pissed off. We're like, we've done everything you told us to do. And yet still. But we're also in these positions of power where you need us as translators. You need us to kind of help bridge the generation that fought and is older and is not going to really fight in the same way they did before, and all of your energy and what you're pushing for. And we're kind of in the middle. So as you're like pushing for social change, I think what we would love is for you to keep doing exactly what you're doing and give us a little bit of benefit of the doubt, but also coach us, because we were not trained to fight head on like you guys are. We were trained to make good on the fights that happened before us. And we need us all together to be working on it, because we want the exact same things you do. We want this country to stand what it says it stands for, instead of being just a tagline that we use. And we're still kind of finding our voices and our choices to do that. So I think together we can really mobilize for the change we want to see. And I'm grateful for Chanice and for all of you on the phone who are committed to that change.
Yeah, I definitely think intergenerational, working together and intergenerational connections between different types of people are a necessary part of social change, because I think young people, it's very easy for us to say that we believe something and not be open to hearing someone who came before us. Like, okay, I understand you believe this, but when I was growing up, this is what my experience was. And I think just having that level of openness, like I like what you said about how your generation, you were told to just have your seat at the table, and now our generation is kind of explaining, like, we want to build our own table and we want to create new systems. So I think, we're going beyond what so many people have never even expected, but just being able to even articulate that and explain to other people who came before us and who have a lot more knowledge and wisdom to us of, why we are so driven and passionate about being such an engaged generation.
Thank you both so much. I'm going to say a couple of words, and then I think Nate will finally take us out. Thank you again, Tanisha. Tanisha is a graduate of our 2018 class of the Presidential Leadership Scholars. And Chanice, I can see you headed in that direction in a few years. Definitely, without a doubt, we can expect to see you there, I'm sure. But I want to really thank you guys for taking the time. You've both said such awesome things that I know everyone's going to take away something different, but I know that there's going to be a takeaway. And I love what you said, Chanice, about being the best version of yourself. And not trying to be someone else, because I think that a lot of teenagers do get on the trend bandwagon. And being the best version of yourself is awesome. Because I always tell my son, do your best to be your best. And so thank you so much. Thank you for your passion. Thank you for just wanting to improve the lives of others. And I mean, we know you're going to do great things, and we just, we're going to look for your name on the presidential ballot one day or something. Because I mean, you like it said, you rock. Girl, you rock. You definitely do. So thank you both so very much. And I'll turn it over to Nate to wrap up.
Thanks, Cherise. Thank you to our panelists, virtual hand clap. This was a tremendous workshop. And I hope everybody who's watching today, and he'll be watching later online, definitely stay involved. And I'm so glad that the Presidential Center is able to provide this resource for everybody here today. And I hope, like Cherise says, there's a takeaway for everybody. And we hope everybody stays safe. We cannot wait to see you back at the Clinton Center when it's safe again. And again, to Chanice and Tanisha, thanks for joining us today. And we cannot wait to work with y'all again in the future. Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Yes,
Bye-bye.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.